Brazil. Black is a shade of brown. So is white, if you look. On Copacabana, the most democratic, crowded, and dangerous of Rio de Janeiro's beaches, all colors merge into one joyous, sun-stunned flesh color, coating the sand with a second, living skin. One day not long after Christmas Day years ago, when the military was in power in far-off Brasilia, the beach felt blinding, what with the noon glare, the teeming bodies, and the salt that Tristão brought back in his eyes from the breakers beyond the sandbar. So strongly did the December sun strike down that small circular rainbows had kept appearing in the spray of the breakers, out there beyond the bar, all about the boy's sparkling head like spirits. Nevertheless, returning to the threadbare T-shirt that served him also for a towel, he spotted the pale girl in a pale two-piece bathing suit, standing erect back where the crowd thinned. She was with another girl, shorter and darker, who was anointing her back with lotion. The cool touches made the first girl arch her spine inward, thrusting her breasts in one direction, and in the other the sleek semicircles of her already greased hips. It was not so much the pallor of her skin that had drawn Tristão's stinging eyes. Very white foreign women, Canadians and Danes, came to this celebrated beach, and German and Irish Brazilians from Sao Paulo in the south were also pale. It was not her whiteness, but the challenging effect of her little suits blending with her skin in an impression of total public nudity. Not total. She wore a black straw hat with a flat crown, rolled-up brim, and glossy dark ribbon, the sort of hat Tristão thought an upper-class girl from Les Blancs would wear to the funeral of her father. "An angel or a whore?" he said to his half-brother Euclides. Euclides was short-sighted, and where he could not see, he hid his confusion behind philosophical questions. "Why cannot a girl be both?" he asked. "I think this dolly was made for me," said Tristão, impulsively, out of the inner depth where his fate was being fashioned in sudden clumsy strokes that carried away, all at once, whole pieces of his life. He believed in spirits and in destiny. He was 19, and not an abandonado, for he had a mother. But his mother was a whore, and even worse than a whore, for she drunkenly slept with men without money, and bred tadpole children like a human swamp of forgetfulness and casual desire. He and Euclides had been born a year apart. Neither knew any more about their fathers than the disparate genetic evidence on their faces. They had spent enough time in school to learn to read street signs and advertisements, and no more. They worked as a team, stealing and robbing when their hunger became great, and were as afraid of the gangs that wished to absorb them as of the military police. These gangs were children, as merciless and innocent as packs of wolves, and for some time Tristão had been feeling he had outgrown crime and must seek a way into the upper world from which advertisements and television and airplanes come. This woman, the spirits now assured him, was the appointed way. His wet and sandy T-shirt in his hand, he picked his way through the other near-naked bodies toward hers, which she held more stiffly in the knowledge that she was being hunted. His T-shirt, a sun-faded orange, said Lone Star, advertising a restaurant in Les Blancs for gringos. Within his black swimming trunks, so tight they showed the compacted bulk of his genitals, he carried, in the little pocket for change or a key, a single-edged razor blade called Gem, sheathed in a scrap of thick leather he had carefully slit. And he thought he had yet another possession, a ring yanked from the finger of an elderly tourist gringa, a ring brassy in color, with the letters D-A-R on a small oval seal, letters that seemed endlessly curious to him because they meant to give. Now he thought to give this ring to the pale beauty, who proudly radiated fear and defiance from her skin as he drew near. Against some resistance of his sea-wrinkled wet skin, He pulled the ring from his little finger, where it fit tightly. The old gringa, with curly blue hair, had worn it where a wedding band would go, on the opposing hand. He had caught her beneath a broken streetlight in Cinelandia, while her husband was engrossed in the advertisements for a nightclub show around the corner, photographs of mulatta showgirls. When he held his razor blade against her cheek, she went limp as a whore herself, the old blue-haired gringa, a few years from the grave yet terrified of a scratch on her wrinkled face. While Euclides slit the straps on her purse, Tristão pulled off her brassy ring, their hands entwined for a moment like those of lovers. Now he held out the ring to the strange girl. Her face in the shade of the black hat had a monkeyish look, an outward curve of the face over the strong teeth that smiled a smile even when her lips were, as now, unsmiling. "May I make you this trivial present, señorita?" "Why would you do that, señor?" This courtliness of address, too, felt like a smile, though the moment was tense and her squat companion looked alarmed, putting a hand across her breasts as if they were treasures that might be stolen. "Because you are beautiful and, what is rarer, not ashamed of your beauty." "It is not the modern style to be ashamed. Yet many of your sex still are, like your friend here, who covers her heavy jugs." The lesser girl's eyes flashed, but with a glance toward Euclides, her indignation collapsed, and she giggled. Tristão felt a slight squirm of disgust at the complicitous, surrendering sound, and Euclides moved a half-step closer on the sand, accepting the space surrendered. He had a frowning, broad face, relentless and puzzled and clay-colored. His father must have been part Indian, whereas Tristão's had boasted pure African blood, as pure as blood can be in Brazil. The shining white girl kept her chin high, stating to Tristão, "It is dangerous to be beautiful. That is how women have learned shame." "You are in no danger from me, I swear. I will do you no harm." The pledge sounded solemn, the boy's voice experimentally dipping into a manly timbre. Now she studied his face. The full Negro features were carved on a frame that had never known gluttony, with a childish shine to the prominent eyes, a rampart-like erectness to the bony brow, and a coppery tinge to his crown of tightly kinked hair. Lightly she reached out to touch the ring. "To give," she read, and playfully stiffened her pale hand so he could place it on a finger. She held it out in the sun so its oval face flashed toward her companion. "You like it, Eudoxia?" Eudoxia was horrified by the contact. "Give it back, Isabel." No doubt it was stolen. "These are good boys," Isabel reassured her companion. "How can it harm us if we let them lie with us while we sun and talk? We are bored with ourselves, you and I. They can tell us of their lives, or they can tell us lies. It will be equally amusing." As it evolved, Tristão and Euclides told almost nothing of their lives, of which they were ashamed. Instead, the girls, talking as if only to each other, described the nuns at the school they attended together, those who were so like men as to have mustaches, those who were thought to be lesbians enjoying a mock marriage, those who were cocks and those who were chickens, those who sought to seduce their pupils, those who were love slaves to priests, those who paid the gardeners to fuck them, those who covered the walls of their cells with pictures of the Pope and masturbated with his sour-mouthed, worried image in their eyes. It was all as in a book of sex, verbal embroidery wrought with the nimble fingers of girls in a sewing circle, their giggling glinting through their embroidery like a silver thread. Tristão and Euclides, who lived in a world where sex was a common staple, like red beans or farinha, worth no more than a few tattered cruzeiros tossed on a wine-stained wooden table, and who had lost their virginities when not yet in their teens, were thick-tongued but enchanted as the girls spun their fantastic suppositions, amusing each other to the point of tears. When Euclides and Eudoxia rising in hesitant unison, went down to the water to swim. A taut silence reigned between the other two. Isabel reached toward his palm, the cover of silver polish, with the hand that glinted with the stolen oval ring. "Would you like to come with me?" "Yes, always," Tristan said. "Then do." "Now?" "Now is the time," she said, her blue-gray eyes gazing into his, her plump upper lip puckered in solemn thought. "For us." Isabel carried a gauzy beach dress, but chose to leave the beach not wearing it, slipping on only sandals of thin white leather to walk along the famous sidewalk of sinuous black and white stripes beside the Avenida Atlantica. She cradled her dress and her towel crumpled in her crooked left arm, so that at least one passerby glanced down expecting to see a brightly swaddled baby. Her dark straw hat floated ahead of Tristan like a flying saucer, the trailing ends of its black ribbon fluttering. Isabel moved more swiftly, with a more athletic gait than he had expected, causing him to stumble and skip-step at her side, catching up. His own sense of decorum had led him to slip on the sandy shirt saying, "Lone Star." The pale girl, appearing all the taller for the length of bare legs, strode as if with a sleepwalker's blind determination, or as if one hesitation might undo her resolve. She walked south toward the fort, and then turned right on a street that led over to Ipanema. There, in the shadows of the buildings and trees, among the shops and restaurants and the glass and aluminum fronts of banks, with doormen and security guards standing stiffly in uniform, her near nudity glowed eerily and drew more glances. Tristan drew protectively closer, although her betranced imperviousness, which had turned her hand icy to his touch, made him feel clumsy and extraneous. In this whirl of apartment houses and guarded streets, she was his leader. She turned at a numbered maroon canopy into a dark foyer, where a Japanese behind a tall desk of black marble veined with green blinked to show surprise, but gave her a small key and buzzed a button that caused an inner glass door to slide open. Passing through this doorway, Tristan felt himself x-rayed, the razor blade in his narrow, damp black trunks tingling, and also his penis, its shrunken curve like that of a cashew. A door of red Brazil wood, waxed to a shine, of many raised panels, yielded to her little key, no bigger than his razor blade. Inside, there reigned a silence of expensive surfaces, vases and carpets and fringed pillows, and the gilded leather backs of books. He had never been in such a space. He felt his breath and freedom of movement taken from him. "Whose home is this?" "My uncle Donaciano's," the girl said. "Don't worry, you won't have to meet him. He works all day in the centro. I will tell the servant to bring us something to drink. Or perhaps you would like something to eat." "Oh, no, señorita, I am not hungry. A glass of water or a little suku is all I need." His mouth had gone very dry as he looked around. So much here to steal. He and Euclides could live for a month on one silver cigarette box, on 2 crystal candlesticks. Isabel called in a flat voice, "Maria." The plump dark maid who came, in no great hurry, as if from many rooms away, glanced at Tristan contemptuously, and with a little flare of terror in her sunken eyes. "Maria," said Isabel, in a voice trying to be neither harsh nor timid, "2 vitaminas, with banana or avocado if there is some. That will do for me, but something for my friend, some of whatever you have made for your own lunch? This is my friend, Tristan." To him, she said, "A sandwich?" "It is not at all necessary, I swear," the boy protested. Yet when the food came, warmed up a carajé, with its fried balls of vatapá, shrimp, and peppers, he ate like a wolf. He had trained his hunger to lie low, but food maddened it, and he left nothing on his plate, not even a smear. Coffee? Maria asked, when she came and cleared. Yes, and then leave us alone, Isabel said. She had removed her little hat, and her long, blonde, glimmering hair heightened her and gave him back that feeling of blindness when he had just emerged dazzled from the sea. You like me? She asked, averting her eyes and blushing. Yes, more than that. You think I am a flirt, a bad girl? I think you are rich, he replied, looking around, and being rich makes people strange. Rich people do what they want, and so they do not know the price of things. But I am not rich, Isabel said, with a new note of grievance and petulance. My uncle is rich, and my father, too, off in Brasilia. But I have nothing of my own. They hold me like a pampered slave, to be given when the nuns have graduated me to some boy who will grow into a man like them, sleek and polite and uncaring. Where is your mother? What does she say of your future? My mother is dead. The baby brother she was making for me strangled on the cord on the way out and tore up her uterus in his dying fury. Or so I was told. I was 4 when it happened. How sad, Isabel. Though he had heard Eudoxia use her name in their chatter, he had not pronounced it before. You have no mother, and I have no father. Where is your father? Tristan shrugged. Dead, perhaps. Vanished, certainly. My mother has had many men, and is not certain who he was. I am 19. It would be 20 years ago. Isabel announced. I am 18 still. He smiled and dared reach out and touch her luminous hair, full of many little lights, like Rio at night seen from Sugarloaf. I am glad. I would not want you to be older, as well as richer. She accepted his touch without flinching, but did not answer his smile with another. This ring you gave me. She held up her hand with the brass oval upon the thickest finger. I must give you something now. It is not necessary. The gift I have in mind would also be a gift to myself. It is time. It is the time in my life. She stood and pushed upward at his lips with her own, less a kiss than an imitation of kisses seen in magazines or television. Her life up to now had been a matter of studying other people's stories. Now she was creating her own story. She led him to a spiral staircase of metal painted a dusty pink that led to the second floor. Trailing a finger experimentally along the railing, as if across a surface of water, Isabel moved down the corridor, suspended here at the height of the snaky-armed chandelier, and thence to a room that was hers, still full of girlhood stuffed animals, with posters on the wall of long-haired singers from England. The little pale pieces of Isabel's bathing suit came off with a shrug and a squirm, a casual, accustomed dance of her slender body, done with a half-defiant, half-questioning smirk on her brave monkey face. She appeared little more naked now than before. We must get clean, she told him, firmly. The shower knobs within the marble cubicle were numerous, and produced various kinds of spray, a bouquet of fine needles or a battering of coarser strings of water in the rhythm of a rapid pulse. Standing with her in the warming waterfall, he felt his cashew become a banana and then a rippled yam bursting with weight. She soaped him there seriously, bending her oval head into the pounding water to see better the swollen veins. When the shower was over, she said, still looking, her fingers tracing one vein, "So, that's what it is. I like it. It is ugly but innocent, like a toad." "Never before?" he asked, embarrassed. "No, never. Does that frighten you, Tristan?" Yes, it did. For if she was a virgin, fucking her became religious, a kind of eternal incrimination. But his blood, helplessly pounding in the yam he carried before him, wrapped in his robe-like towel, drew him after this apparition who led him to her girlhood bed. She flopped herself strictly in the middle, leaving nowhere for him to lie but on top of her. Uncertainly, studying his face for direction, she spread her white legs. She asked, "You have had many girls?" He nodded, ashamed that not all had been girls, that in the beginning there had been women twice his age, old drunken women, friends of his mother's, throwing him this scrap of themselves like food to an amusing little pig. "Then have you any advice for me?" "My advice is to let yourself sink to the point where my pleasure and yours are the same. It will not be easy the first time. It will hurt." With his own hand he explored below, found the place where her lips had begun stickily to part, and did the guiding. A little later, as if doubting his own advice, he asked, "Does it hurt?" Isabel had stiffened beneath him in the effort of overriding her flesh's instinctive rejection. A sudden warm sweat had arisen all across her pale skin. Her chin jerked back and forth as if no other part of her impaled body dared move. He, too, was sweating with worry at her virginal tightness. It was a burden, being a lover and not a pet pig gobbling a wet scrap. Yet beyond the dark wall they were facing was a paradise, he knew. "Shall I stop? I could come out." Furiously, her chin now snapped back and forth, saying no. "For God's sake, do it," she said nevertheless. He drove hard into darkness, each thrust deepening the shade of red behind his clamped eyelids. The convulsions of his coming startled her out of her own body. Tenderly, wonderingly, her white hands flitted on his arched black back, seeking to heal the great rending he had enjoyed in her gummy depths, in the web of her silken limbs. His panting ebbed. His voice became reasonable, considerate. "Did it hurt?" "Yes. Oh, God, yes. Just like the nuns said it would, for the sin of Eve." Yet her legs, her arms, tightened their embrace of him as his chivalrous impulse to relieve her body of his weight communicated itself. "Dear Isabel," he sighed, embarrassed for better words, and still feeling shy with her name. One task heroically performed did not entitle him to equality with this patrician beauty. When he at last was permitted to remove his penis, it was coated with her blood, and she seemed to blame him for staining the scum-green satin quilt. "Maria will see and tell my uncle," she exclaimed. "She is a spy?" "They are friends." She had leaped up and brought from the bathroom a wet washcloth, with which she dabbed and scrubbed at the stain. It was an irregular stain, shaped by his offer to stop like a chalice, with a bowl, a base, and a thin red stem between. "You should have spread a towel," he said, vexed at her appearing to blame him for her own blood, and to be rushing from their exalted moment together into details of mere housekeeping. She heard his offended note, and sought to mend his pride, turning from the bed and docilely pawing with the reddened wash-rag at what was now returning to its cashew shape. As it retracted, her virginal blood sank brownish into the wrinkled, eggplant-colored skin. Feeling the pain between her legs increase as the high drama of herself supine in defloration wore off, she impatiently pushed the wet wad into his hand. "Here, Tristan, it's your mess, too." Though imbued with the fastidious pride of even the poorest of Brazilian men, Tristan accepted the washcloth and comprehended her mood. She was giddy with the daring of what had been done, what could never be undone. Their uncontrollable moods are the price men pay for women's unearthly beauty and their habitual pain. When Tristan returned from the bathroom, wearing his damp bathing trunks, Isabel was still naked, but for the DAR ring, and on her blonde head a straw hat, like the black straw hat she had worn to the beach, but dyed strawberry red. She cocked her head and posed like a bocce dancer, white buttocks outthrust and one knee bent above an arched foot upon its toes. Her toes were whitened by the pressure of the pose, and a drying streak of blood showed on the inside of that leg's thigh. It was wonderful, she was thinking, to have a man see you naked, to need to have no shame in front of him. "You still like me?" she asked, with a mournful seriousness, her upcast eyes just showing beneath the impudent hat's rim. "I have no choice," he told her. "You are mine now." "No, I don't think so, my dear," said her uncle Donaciano, his supple portliness sheathed in a gray suit that at certain angles of light flashed like aluminum. "I don't think this is within the bounds at all, even of our permissive age, in this all-too-progressive society." A month had passed. Maria had told her employer of the boy's visit that day, and of Isabel's constant absences at the beach, absences so long that since she returned without sunburn, she and the boy must be going to the cinema together or resorting to a by-the-hour hotel. Certainly she was not going off to be with Eudoxia. Eudoxia's parents had taken the girl, with her 3 brothers, from Rio to the mountains to escape the summer heat. Isabel, when younger, had often experienced the pleasures of Petropolis and Nova Friburgo with her uncle and his wife, elegantly slender Aunt Luna, from the thin upper crust of Salvador, before their unfortunate separation, since divorce was illegal. "What bounds are there in Brazil?" Isabel asked. "I thought this was a country where each man made himself, regardless of color." "I do not speak of color. I am colorblind, like our Constitution, in tune with the national temperament we inherited from the sugar planters. This is not South Africa or the United States. But a man cannot make himself out of thin air. He must have materials, which are in the hands of very few, where they have always been," said Isabel, drawing with impatient vigor on one of her uncle's tinted English cigarettes. He appraised her, trying to muster uncle love back into his features. "You have used the boy. You went to the beach and picked up a tool with which to mutilate yourself. You have become, with this living tool you used, a woman. You have done it out of my sight, and this was considerate and proper. But a lasting attachment will take place in my sight, in the sight of society, in the sight of your distinguished father. Even, if you believe anything of what the nuns have told you, in the sight of your dear mother, our lovely lost Cordelia, gazing with tears down from heaven." Isabel shifted on the sumptuous crimson sofa, its ribbed velvet whispering against the underside of her thighs, and stubbed out her cigarette. She did not want her mother spying on her. She did not want another woman inside her life. Her mother had died attempting to give birth to a brother. Isabel had never forgiven her for this double betrayal, though she often compared photographs of her mother, misted and dulled, all of them, by the fact of her death, with her own face in the mirror. "So," Uncle Donaciano was concluding, "you will no longer see this Moleki. After Carnival, you will begin your studies at the university, our illustrious Pontificia Universidade Católica do Rio de Janeiro. While in attendance there, I expect, you will entertain fashionable leftist fantasies and engage in anti-government protests, demanding land reform and the cessation of atrocities against the Amazonian Indians. While engaging in such quixotic agitation, you may fall in love with a fellow protester who will become, upon graduation, despite his youthful scruples, a member of the professional class, and perhaps even a member of the government, which by then, perhaps, the military will have freed to resume its civilian guise." He sighed. As was the way with Uncle Donaciano, Boredom was driving the energy from his words. After 15 minutes, everything bored him. That is how we shall brush him aside, Isabel said to herself. The young are not so easily bored. Gaily she kissed his butternut-brown forehead and sauntered from the living room and up the spiral stair, believing, falsely, that her uncle had simply been going through the obligatory but empty verbal motions. Since beginning to sleep with one of the poor, she felt more at ease with Maria, less afraid of her bitter Indian blood and taciturnity. "My uncle," she sneered in the kitchen, "he forgets I am no longer a child in care of the nuns. He loves you very much and wishes only what is best for you." "Why do you tell him everything? I can no longer bring Tristan to my room. You are such a traitor to us." "I will not deceive your uncle. He is very good to me." "Ha!" Isabel mocked, while helping herself to a plate of cararou with which Maria had intended to feed herself. "He pays you a dog's wage and fucks you and beats you. I know he beats you, because I hear the noises from your room, though you never cry out." "Your uncle is a kind man," Maria said. "If he ever strikes me, it is because he is angry with himself. His blows are soft, like that of a kitten batting a paper ball." "And his fucking, is that soft, too?" Maria made no answer. In Indian silence, she reached down a plain plate from the cupboard. "Your uncle is a kind man," she repeated, "but you must not push him too hard. You must go to university, and go with nice boys. Tristan is not for you." Isabel flicked back her hair. "We sought each other out," she said, "on the beach, among multitudes. We will never let each other go. What can my uncle do about it? Nothing. I am 18. Maria said, "He can have you taken to Brasilia to live with your father. No one escapes from Brasilia. It is surrounded by wilderness, I have heard, and has a giant moat." "Did he say that? Is that what he told you, Maria? To Brasilia to live with my father? Tell me." "I know nothing for certain, little mistress," Maria said at last. "But he and his brother converse on the telephone. I think if you do not give up this boy, do not expect to spend Carnival this year in Rio." The interior of the shanty Tristan's mother occupied was here and there pierced by bright shards of light leaked between sheets of zinc overhead and the pieces of painted wood and printed cardboard that composed the walls. The shack was bathed in nature, for it perched on one of the highest and steepest slopes of the Morro de Babilonia. His mother's name, Isabel had learned, was Ursula Raposo. The woman had been awakened last night by their breathless entry. It had been a long scramble up on the slope of the Morro de Babilonia. After the moon-blanched zigzags of the mountain streets, the inside of the shack was as dark as a bottle of ink. A match had flared, come close enough to Isabel's face to singe her long eyelashes, and been blown out, in a gust of breath sweetly rank with the fumes of sugar-cane liquor. "This white girl somebody's," the voice attached to the match in the foul breath had said. "How come you steal her?" "Not steal, Mother. Rescue. Her uncle was about to send her to her father. She doesn't want to go. She wants to be with me. We love each other. Her name is Isabel." "You bring me money?" "A little, Mother. Enough for a week's cachaça." There was a smaller papery rustling, and the sour-sweet cloud of alcohol, with the body warmth attached to it, moved away, and Isabel felt her lover's strong hand pull her lightly in a direction where she scarcely dared step, for the floor beneath her feet was uneven and littered, and the darkness still absolute. "Here, Isabel," he said. His tense grip tugged her down into a narrow space where the bare clay was overlaid with scratchy lumps, rough bags stuffed, from their faint fragrance, with what might have been dried flowers or the skeletons of very small and delicate dead creatures. Stretching out her own delicate bones, thinking herself as safe from pursuit now as a body in its tomb, she whimpered in an approach to pleasure. "Quiet," Ursula's voice instantly snarled, right against, it seemed, Isabel's ear, though they had groped a good distance away, through this breathing blackness burdened with other shapes and presences. Close by, soft snoring arose, or an overlay of several sets of rhythmic lungs, and Tristan's mother began to sing incoherently, softly, incessantly, the song going up and down, but refusing to come to an end. Perilous and strange though her situation was, Isabel felt luxuriously sleepy after the hectic escape from Ipanema. Tristan's body was hard and vigilant beside hers, and he had given her, to pillow her face in, a wadded rag musky with the smell of another's sweat. Her lover was tense and restless, and had placed between them, with several anxious adjustments, what they had lugged up the hill, the 2 duffel bags containing her clothes and the expensive treasures they had stolen from Uncle Donaciano's apartment, the silver cigarette box, the crystal candlesticks, a begemmed gold cross once stolen from an 18th-century church in Minas Gerais, and sold to her uncle by an antique dealer, and a cube-shaped wad, secured with many rubber bands, of 10,000 Cruzeiro notes, which they had found tucked among his perfumed pastel underwear. As he anxiously pressed the bags tighter between them, the sharp edges of their booty dug into Isabel's flesh. The jab seemed to tell her that she had left coddled girlhood behind. She had embarked upon the path of woman, which is a path of pain. Nevertheless, nothing kept her from sleeping amid these warm entrails of squalor, while her husband, so he now seemed, turned tensely beside her, plotting their future in the inky blackness. When she awoke, day declared itself in the blue knives of light suspended about her, each with its halo of smoke. Someone was cooking, a girl 12 or 13, squatting to a fire over which was propped a round oil drum lid for a stovetop near the ragged doorway for ventilation. Isabel recognized the smells as coffee and angu, corn cakes made mostly with water and salt. Other bodies were stirring. She recognized from that day at the beach the squat form of Euclides. He looked in her direction, but did not seem to see her. She now thought, in her innocence, that if she could form an alliance with his mother, it would lessen Tristan's burden. Ursula was still in her bed. A little man lay beside her on the wide and dirty, sweetly stinking, straw-stuffed pallet, still unconscious, with his face pressed against her side like a dark leech. The whites of Ursula's eyes had been yellowed and curdled by drink, and some of her teeth were missing. "White girl, what you want here?" she asked, seeing Isabel standing at her feet. "Tristan brought me. My family want to part us. We love one another. We want to live together forever." Tristan's mother did not smile. Her sullen features, in fact, sank a little deeper into anger. "Lucky if love lasts as long as a fuck," she said. "Trash of mine got no right to go loving any fucking body." Tristan, who had been hiding from this confrontation between Ursula and Isabel, now came forward. "We will not stay here, Mother. It is too disgusting." "Trash with high ideas, the one that disgust me. How much you think her rich folks pay to have her back?" "Plenty, I'm sure," said Euclides, who had been speaking with the girl tending the cooking fire. Of Isabel he asked, "Where is your friend, Eudoxia?" "Her family have taken her to the mountains," Isabel told him. "She is a typical bourgeois girl, full of bold chatter, but with no courage for life." Euclides squinted and said, "Too much courage becomes the love of death." "We love one another," Tristan continued to his mother. "My plan is to take the train to Sao Paulo and find work in the auto plant, with the help of my brother Chiquinho there." This was the first that Isabel had heard of a third brother. The mother of them all looked blank, but then slid her eyes as if to declare cunning. "Another trash," she said. "Never sends a penny home, and a rich man by now. making those fushkas everybody drives. If the medicine man give me a decent potion, none of you trash be burdening Mother Earth." The girl by the tin can cook stove asked now, "Do we feed her? The batter only made 8 cakes." "Give her mine," Tristan said. "No, you need your strength," Isabel said, though in fact she was faint with hunger. This lightness in her head, this incessant salivating, did the poor live with these sensations all the time? She counted the people in the shack, and there were 6, including the man still asleep. Tristan saw the darting of her eyes and read her thoughts. He explained, "There is also Granny." Out of the tangle of mats and bags and shadows in the far section of the shack, a sweetly smiling assemblage of dark rags and bones had lifted up. An elderly, emaciated woman, wearing a bandana wrapped as a turban, shuffled forward. Her eyes had no irises. She was blind. Her skin was cracked like black earth after a long drought. "Is this your mother?" Isabel asked Ursula. "My mother? I had no fucking mother," came the answer in a mumbled monotone. "Old Granny say she the mother of my mother back in Bahia, but who can prove? She stays here. She has nowhere else to go. Everybody comes here, crowding in to be supported by my cunt. My poor cunt worn out by penniless trash like this." She angrily snapped her side, so the man clinging there was jarred loose onto his back again, his eyes slightly opened, like the eyes of a lizard when it flicks its tongue. "Nothing in his pocket but his balls," Ursula told Isabel, and, as if sensing her need for instruction, "always make him pay before you do a fucking thing." Granny made 7. There would still be 1 spare angout cake, Isabel was calculating. She and Tristan could split it. Her hunger was like a solid object, viewed through the transparent veil of the life around her. The very walls of the shack, with their fuzzy blue shards of daylight, felt transparent, as the sounds of the stirring favela, and the roar of Rio traffic far below, and the vertical pressure of the morning sun intensified. In the corner out of which Granny had emerged, 2 other bodies, those of a stocky man and woman past first youth, but not yet old, rose up and groped through the smoky doorway to the out-of-doors, each deftly lifting a cake from the stove as they went. Isabel marveled at how many people she had slept so soundly among. These poor, like animals, had developed a tactful politics of space. The whole shack, now that she could gauge its dimensions, was no bigger than her uncle's master bathroom, without its massive sunken tub, the lavender toilet with its padded seat, the matching bidet, the 2 cabinets, the clothes hamper, the towel racks, the heated towel rack rounded at the top like a church window, the separate shower stall with frosted glass, and the tiled floor you stepped down onto, the closet where Maria kept stacks of folded towels of all sizes, like fuzzy stairs, it had seemed to her as a little girl. When she grew up, she would climb those stairs and become a housewife, like Aunt Luna, only with even more towels, and nappier ones, and a husband even handsomer than Uncle Donaciano. When they arrived at the Estação da Luz in Sao Paulo, they found a taxi and told the driver to take them to the only hotel of which Isabel knew, the Auton Palace, where 10 years ago she had stayed for a weekend with her father. Her mother was already dead, and there had been a tall woman who had been too warm to Isabel. She had bought her candy and trinkets and given her hugs like an actress trying out for the role of a mother, but too glamorous and young for the part. Now, at the same hotel, Isabel proved too young for the part she wished to play, that of wife. The hotel clerk glanced at her, and then at Tristan, his T-shirt and sun-faded shorts exposing his long black limbs, and told her they had no rooms. She fought back the tears heating her eyes, and asked where, then, could they go. The clerk seemed nice to her, beneath his professional hauteur. He reminded her of some of her cousins, sliding his milky blue eyes, with lashes almost white, like those of a pig, this way and that to make certain he was unobserved, he wrote on a piece of Autant Palace notepaper, Hotel Amour, followed by an address. Walk rapidly, he advised, and do not talk to strangers. The hotel had been a coffee planter's mansion, with airy vaulted chambers, now subdivided and furnished in synthetic substances from the 1950s. Isabel felt like a woman of the world, unpacking her clothes into drawers and arranging herself on the sofa and dialing room service in level tones commanding that food and drink appear. The clerk downstairs had been a fat Italo-Brazilian in a collarless shirt and had not hesitated to rent them a room, though the mulatto bellhop, who had carried their duffel bag and knapsack, waggled his hand until they had tipped him double and audibly spat on the hall floor when he had closed the door. But the staff came to like them as the days wore on. Few guests stayed more than an hour or two.